Hey there, this is Tyler, again coming at you with a video to break down some of the parts of Medicare. Now, this one covers a topic that can be very overwhelming, it can be very confusing, and the simple reason for that is because it's overwhelming and it's confusing. That's your prescription drug coverage. Now, this is going to apply, anybody that enrolls in Medicare is required to have prescription drug coverage, so whether you go with a standalone prescription drug plan or one that's included with the Medicare Advantage plan, also called the Medicare Advantage Prescription Drug Plan. This is going to basically explain how they work because from the prescription standpoint, they're both pretty much the same thing, standalone prescription drug or the prescription drug part of a Medicare Advantage plan. Okay, so here we go. Here's basically how this boils down. Your medications are going to fall into one of 5 tiers. Now, for every rule, there is an exception. But generally speaking, all Medicare Advantage, all prescription drug plans are going to classify your prescriptions in one of 5 tiers. Tier 1 is the least expensive prescriptions, typically generics. This is going to be your run-of-the-mill stuff. The 2 that I think of most commonly is high blood pressure and cholesterol medications. Okay, those are pretty common. So they're relatively cheap for that reason, just because so many folks take them. Okay, Tier 2, these are going to be a higher price generic or low cost name brand prescription. Okay, the majority of the medications that are probably in your medicine cabinet are going to fall into Tier 1 or Tier 2. That's pretty common. Most of them are going to sit somewhere right in there. Behind that comes Tier 3. These are mostly high cost name brand prescriptions. Okay, so again, if you open up the medicine cabinet, you may have a few of those that are sitting here in Tier 3. Tier 4, these start to become less common, but you may have them in your medicine cabinet. These are non-preferred generic and non-preferred name brand. So if there's a medication that there's 5 different types on the market, 2 of them are name brand, 3 of them are generic, and your doctor prescribes you the most expensive of the generic or the name brand, it's probably going to be a Tier 4 because it's a non-preferred because there's alternative options. Now, of course, you work with your doctor to decide what makes the most sense for you, but just know that some of those may fall into Tier 4. And then Tier 5, these are the highest cost prescriptions. Typically, specialty medications are going to fall here. We'll talk about those a little bit more specifically at the end. There are a number of Tier 5 medications, but cancer is one right off the top of my head that immediately you're pretty much looking at a specialty medication. That's a good example for that. If you've got cancer, we're dealing with some pretty severe stuff, and so you're typically looking at a Tier 5 medication in that case. Okay. Then, of course, there are medications that are not on a formulary, meaning they're not covered by your prescription drug or your Medicare Advantage prescription drug plan. So as we start talking about your options and we start breaking down your medications, we will look at that to make sure everything is on the formulary. Just because one provider covers it doesn't mean that all providers will cover it. So, there's some things that we've got to keep in mind if there's some medications you take to make sure that they're going to fall in at least one of these 5 tiers, and preferably trying to find a provider that will put them in Tier 1 or Tier 2 because the providers ultimately get to decide where those sit. And what one provider may call a Tier 3, another may call a Tier 2. So, again, we can look at that specifically for your particular situation. Now, we've got the 5 tiers, but then the way that you pay for those medications falls into 4 different stages. There's the deductible, the initial, the gap, also called the donut hole, and catastrophic. Deductible, just like what it sounds. Anytime you have a deductible for any sort of health care, you got to pay the deductible before the insurance pitches in to pay their contribution to it. Now, I will mention this as it speaks to the deductible. The majority of the prescription drug and Medicare Advantage prescription drug plans, they have no deductible for Tiers 1 and Tier 2. Okay, so it comes right out of the bat, your health insurance provider that's providing that prescription drug coverage, they will immediately be covering that. It's pretty common for them to have a deductible at tier 3 or above. Some of them will have no deductible across the board. Those tend to be much more expensive prescription drug plans. And again, sometimes there's a time and a place for those. We can look at that in greater detail. Deductible is usually right around $480 deductible. And that would start at tier 3, 4, and 5. Okay, typically tier 1 and tier 2 are not subject to that deductible. After the deductible, you hit the initial stage. So here we have a cost sharing between the insured, you, and the insurer, whoever it is that's providing that insurance for you. Okay, so sometimes it's a copay, sometimes it's a co-insurance. So in the event of a plan that does not have a deductible for tier 1 or tier 2, some medications have $0 copays. You just walk into the pharmacy, you walk out with your medication, and your wallet stays in your pocket the whole time. Others are going to have a small copay, $2, $3, $4 for your copay. And then others will have a co-insurance where you're paying a percentage of a medication. So again, we'll look specifically at any medicines that are in your medicine cabinet, but just know that's generally how that works. Now, the initial is the combination of what you pay and what the insurance pays up to, as of 2022, up to $4,430 in medications. Okay. Once your total combined between you and any manufacturers pitch in and the insurance company, once that exceeds $4,430, you move out of the initial plan. So if you're primarily tier 1, tier 2 drugs, you're never going to break that. If you've got 1 or 2 tier 3s, you may stay in the initial. Again, it'll just depend on what it is you're taking. Then we get to the donut hole. So what happens once you break that $4,400 mark? You've now crossed into the donut hole. So the visual, and the reason it's called the donut hole is because if this was deductible here, the insurance will help once you break that deductible. Then you've got the initial up here. So the insurance, the manufacturer, right, they're all contributing towards that. But once you break that $4,400 mark, you're now into the donut hole where it's all on you. So the way that works is you're going to pay 25% of the cost of the medication in the donut hole. So if it's a $1,000 medication, your copay, basically your co-insurance, is going to be $250. If it's a $50 medication, then your copay will be $7.50. Okay, so you're going to pay 25% of the cost in the donut hole. The manufacturer on a brand name will also contribute 75% towards that. Now, why is that important? Because if you're taking a brand name drug, what you're paying and what the manufacturer is paying will all go towards the amount you've got to pay to get out of the donut hole. If you are taking a generic medication that puts you in the donut hole, then you're paying 25%, the insurance is paying 75%, but that 75% does not count towards graduating you out of the donut hole. Okay. Now, again, you're going to have to talk to your doctor. It's going to come down to what they prescribe and what the insurance companies, they get a bit of a say in that as well. If a generic covers you just as well, they're going to prefer that generic, and that's what they're going to cover. So, again, case by case, we can break that down based upon your need. But just know that's basically how it works. When you get into the donut hole, you are contributing 25% of the cost of that medication through the donut hole. Okay. Now, once you reach the other side of the donut hole, you have to have put in $7,050. That does not include your premiums. So if your monthly premium for your prescription plan was, say, $10 a month, then that $10 does not count towards that $7,050. If you're taking a generic medication, it's only your 25% counting towards it. If you're taking a name brand, it's your 25% plus the manufacturer's 75%. That's all going to count towards it. So name brands will graduate the donut hole faster, but keep in mind, name brands, especially non-preferred name brands, are going to be in a tier 4, which means they are going to be more expensive. So again, we'll look at what's in your medicine cabinet. We'll break down all the plans. We'll shop all the providers, and we'll see who's going to basically help you with your medications if you are on some of those higher end medications for more specialty or more severe situations. Okay, so that's how the donut hole works. Once you graduate past the donut hole, you're now into catastrophic, and there it's going to be a 5% co-insurance. So again, if we have a $100 medication, you're going to be paying $5. If it's a $1,000 medication, you're going to be paying $50. Okay, so that's how that works once you get to catastrophic. Now, this system, this process of stages, it resets every calendar year. So if you are starting Medicare in October, and let's say you are taking one of those tier 4 or tier 5 medications, and you hit the donut hole in November, you're going to be in the donut hole November, December, then you'll start over again in January. Okay, because everything follows a calendar year from from January through December. And then it will reset each year. This is why it is that it's common for folks to reach back out to me in October or November of each year so that we can review, are you taking the same medications? Has any of those changed? And let's look at the prescription drug plans that are available to you. Are any of those going to reduce the cost of those medications based on the upcoming plan year? Okay, so from January through December, that's how those 4 stages are going to be calculated. Now, there's some additional notes here. Diabetes medications. If you're diabetic, predominantly if you have any sort of an injection or a quick pen. There are some providers that have a diabetes cost sharing program to try and keep the cost of those insulins, the Humalog, the Novolog, whatever it is you're taking, to try and keep those lower. So we can talk about those specifically. Prescription clubs. There are some great prescription clubs out there. The first one that jumps to mind is GoodRx. A lot of folks are familiar with GoodRx. They use GoodRx. There's nothing that says that you have to stop using any of those prescription clubs once you get your prescription drug coverage. If you're getting a better rate with your prescription club than you are with your prescription drug coverage, by all means, keep using that prescription club. Okay, that can also be helpful if you find yourself suddenly in the donut hole. Prescription clubs can help a lot in that case as well. Manufacturer discounts. These generally are not available if insurance is covering your medication. But again, once you get to the donut hole, insurance is not covering your medication at that point. And so you can always look and see if you can qualify for a manufacturer's discount while you're in that donut hole. That can be a huge benefit to you as well. And then I've already mentioned cancer a little bit. The reason I bring that one up specifically, 60% of all adults will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lifetime. God forbid. And if you are diagnosed with cancer, pray that it's caught quickly and dealt with efficiently. But cancer medications, your hair loss medication, your anti-nausea medication, your anything for the chemotherapy, anything getting you to that. Those medications are specialty. They're tier 5. They're very expensive. So there is an additional insurance that I strongly recommend that will pay up to $5,000 or even up to $10,000 towards cancer, particularly if you are ever diagnosed with that. And it's a relatively cheap thing to add that can save you literally thousands of dollars in the event that you are ever diagnosed with cancer. So we can talk about that more specifically as well, but those are just some additional side notes. Feel free to reach out to me here, 513-466-0209. That's my direct line. As always, I'm a broker, so I don't work for any insurance company. I can represent all of them equally without bias. And I don't work in a call center. If I did, I wouldn't have time to put content like this together. So that is my direct line, no extension. You can call or text that and you'll get me. Or you can email me, tyler@moderninsurancestore.com. Thanks for hanging out with me here for about 14 minutes. Hopefully that was beneficial. If you have questions, I'll be here. And otherwise, God bless and enjoy your day.